All right, regulating negative emotions. What I'm going to share with you here is a couple of the skills that most of them come out of dialectical behavior therapy. Some come out of the more current therapies. I've combined a couple of them, so I hope you'll give me license to share these with you. I just want to give you some of the basics that I know work and that I know there's good evidence behind. But first of all, what I'd like to say, we mentioned it before, it is becoming evident that there are biological factors on two dimensions, sensitivity and intensity of emotions. Meaning, some people are more sensitive to their emotions, and some people feel emotions more intensely than other people do. Okay, so if there were possible, if we had a glass and we were able to have this much anger, it might make me frustrated, but if you're more sensitive, it's going to make you really in a rage. Okay, but it's the same amount of anger. And so when you consider that, then we have those that are walking through the world who have a much more florid experience of their emotions because they're going off and they're going off much more intensely. All the more reason why these individuals need to learn emotion regulation skills, because for negative emotions, one positive, we would think that that would be a really great thing to be able to experience more of your emotions, but it typically isn't because there's so much more on the negative. So it becomes much more important for them to learn to regulate negative emotions. And their experience can actually be incredibly fulfilling and creative and wonderful if they learn that. But if they don't, they often find themselves in the quagmire of struggling with the pain of, painful emotions. History of trauma gives you a vulnerability to negative emotions. Clearly, it's been shown that both shame-based trauma, well, not so much shame-based trauma, but PTSD, and we're coming to understand about shame-based trauma that does interfere with your ability to regulate your emotions. Active addiction clearly interferes with your ability to regulate. And then early life learning, being in a family system that doesn't support it, where you didn't learn it or see it. Okay, the contemplative moment. One skill, we talked about this earlier, it's increase the time between feeling the emotion and taking action. So you have the feeling, you have the action urge, do whatever you can do to increase that moment so you can make a choice about your behavior. And very often there's a very simple thing that you can teach your clients to do, which is delay. Just delay. And just get them to agree that they're not going to make a decision, they're not going to take the action for 24 hours. And that alone can help them learn the skill of, okay, I'm really angry, I really need to do something about this, and I need to wait for 24 hours. And if the right thing in 24 hours is to strike out, I will strike out. Verbally. If I need to leave, I will leave. If I need to send the email, I'll do it. But wait 24 hours before you do it. And so that way it doesn't feel invalidating, but it teaches them to expand that, because you don't have to tell them that their idea is wrong. You don't have to correct them, because what will happen is once they sober up from that emotion, their perceptual field opens up, and you can just trust that to work in your favor, because they're going to immediately start considering all the other options that might be available for their behavior. So you don't have to say, I wouldn't do that if I were you. I just say, wait. So let's sit with it and wait for 24 hours. And if in 24 hours it still feels like the right thing to do, and you haven't been ruminating on this, and you haven't been getting all involved in the emotion, and it still feels like the right and wise thing to do, then go ahead. That's the wise thing to do. Focus your physical senses on an object, a color, sunset, picture. For some that are really super sensitive, this can be extremely helpful. We found that some of our borderline clients, that if they can focus on a color or a visual cue in those moments that they get really dysregulated, can help. Doesn't always, but can. If they can find a way to get separate and just focus their visual perception on something, that can help. Now, there's another skill that's often used in DBT, which I didn't go into here, but it typically works for those who are extremely dysregulated and are accustomed to cutting. Things like holding ice in your hand can work really well. And while that may sound a little, like what was it they used to do where they dunk people underwater? I've forgotten what the name of that was. It really is about getting them to it's such a sharp physical sensation, doesn't hurt them, that it gets them in tune with their physical senses, and it breaks it for a little while. So anything that you can do to expand that moment from the time you feel it until the time you take action is helpful. Take a mini vacation, walk around the block, read a movie, novel. Just don't read a technical book. Read something you get emotionally engaged in. Don't make it worse. Don't get drunk again, in essence. Don't sit there and ruminate on it. Don't sit there and talk about all the bad things that happened. Don't keep going back to that well and taking more and more and more of it. Even though it feels good, and even though everyone's agreeing with you, you're just keeping yourself in that emotional state. So the best thing you can do is don't talk about it, don't obsess about it, and avoid people, places, and things that trigger that emotion for a while. Lay off of it. Get yourself back. And truly, when you start using this language with clients, they get it. You can use it in that direct way. Lay off of it. You're just keeping yourself drunk on it right now. So you have a legitimate feeling. I honor it. You're angry. You're sad. It's valid because you feel it. But what you're doing is hurting yourself by keeping yourself drunk or intoxicated on that emotion. Back away for a while. Allow yourself to sober up, and then let's see what we can do. The self-soothe skill: focus your attention on pleasurable activity that involves at least one of your 5 senses. Some of the suggestions are making a cup of tea or getting a massage, taking a hot bath, pet the cat or dog. Again, every level of this works. I think for me, again, kind of going to the gym fits into the self-soothe. It depends on the level of the client and how dysregulated they get. Teflon mind skill is silly as this one sounds. It works, and it's worked for me too. And there are a variety of ways in which this is called, but I like the term Teflon mind because it really illustrates it. It is, you can walk through this situation and you can put on your shield of Teflon, and no matter what is said, no matter what happens, it doesn't have to stick to you. But the only way that works is if you consciously go through the situation saying, it's not going to stick. I'm going through, this is going to happen, I can be here, and I'm just going to move right through it. Teflon mind. I don't have to pick it up. I can let it hit and fall down, and I don't have to deal with it. And in particularly stressful situations that tend to bring up a lot of negative emotions, that can be extraordinarily helpful. One thing in the moment skill, another one that's been shown to be highly effective, which is, okay, anytime you get dysregulated with a lot of negative emotions, you have, I got to do this, I've got to do that, this thing is going wrong, it's all coming down on me, I've got to take steps right now to get it all done. And you get overwhelmed with it. Backing off of that and literally making a list of things to do and committing to yourself that you're only going to do one thing in the moment. Right now, all I'm going to do is look at the bank statement. That's all I have to do, or open it for that matter. And you do what's doable. And then you do the next thing on the list. And then you do the next thing. Our culture really has taught us to be very unskillful with multitasking emotionally. It doesn't work with our emotions very well. It's very hard to be present, and it particularly contributes to this problem, because one of the things that really can work for us is if I will be here and be present for this, and then move on to the next and the next, helps to reduce the distressful emotions. All right, the grounding skill. Visualize yourself planted on the earth, and your feet have roots that extend deep into the ground. Imagine that you're connected to all living things, and tell yourself that everything is as it should be. This last statement is really controversial, and I'll share a little story with you. Back in, it was the late 90s when I was trained with Marsha Linehan for DBT. It was a group of therapists about the size room, and she said this statement, she always does, around radical acceptance, which is everything is perfectly as it should be. And one of the therapists stood up and said, I will never accept that the death of my son is as it should be. And as you can imagine, the room fell silent, and how do you even think of answering that, you know? But the underlying truth there still remains, which everything is perfectly as it should be, because it is. It is. And the dialectic that we have to live in is that there are some things we can change and some things that we can't. But everything currently is right now, so therefore we have to sit with it and accept it and learn to be with it. The grounding skill can really help with getting to that place of radical acceptance. And then decrease vulnerability. And this is one of the ones many of us know about HALT. Just beginning to notice, and it's amazing to me how many of us don't do this, which is what is making us vulnerable to negative emotions. Are you hungry? You know, if you want to get me angry, just find me at a time when my blood sugar is low. Those of you who have a man in your life, you know, this seems to be prevalent with men, but when we get hungry, it's like, you know, I don't want to talk, I want to eat. And my response to what you have to say will be different after I eat than before. Nothing really kind of puts me in a state as when I'm invited to someone's house for dinner and you walk in the door, nothing, you don't smell anything, you don't see anything, and it goes on and on and on, and I can hardly even pay attention to the conversation. I'm just out of it, you know, like, you know, there have been literally a couple of times where it's gone on like 9:30, 10, it's 10:30, I'm like, you know, I'm going to have to leave and go get something to eat. I can't be here for this. But it's that hungry thing, you know, it really makes us irritable. It's very, very simple. And yet, when we can't be present with who we are, we're not tuned into it. So learning to identify those states that make us vulnerable to negative emotions, when we're angry, when we're lonely, and when we're tired. Okay. Self-efficacy is found to be influenced negatively by trauma, an Albert Bandura finding that goes back to 1973. Very rigorous finding, and the only effective treatments for trauma are those that are found to increase self-efficacy positively. So our goal really in treating the trauma is to look at how are we supporting your ability to cope in life and your feeling that you can cope. And if I'm supporting your ability to come to therapy or come to treatment, I'm not doing my job, because I need to say you have the ability within yourself to make this right and support that. And you don't really need me. I will be of assistance, but you don't need me for that. What you need is to be able to access it within yourself and validate it within yourself. I like this quote, and I'd like to end with it. Chase down your passion like it's the last bus of the night. Finally, 5 emotions, 1 positive joy. Our emotional system is a wonderful thing. It's a painful thing. It makes life rich. It is the thing that makes life rich. If we think of going through life as robots without emotions, what would life be? And yet, for many of us, we don't take the time to expand the moments of joy, to till the soil so that there is more joy. We don't conduct our therapy around joy. We conduct it around the pathology. We talk about the pathology, we reinforce the pathology, versus how do you increase joy in your life? And as we begin, those who've gone through shame and been traumatized by shame, as they begin to tune in to what brings them joy, create a space where that can increase, and then find the ability to follow that, they naturally begin to develop the ability to self-validate. But not until they can begin to see more joy naturally coming in their life that they have the ability to control it will the change happen. So whatever we can do to support that makes a difference. So chase your passion like it's the last bus of the night. Thank you.